What's up, guys, and welcome back to another playoff matchup video. So this evening we'll be covering the Dallas Stars versus Colorado Avalanche matchup. Two absolute juggernauts forced to go out at it in round one. And if right off the bat, I'm looking at the Twitter boards and I'm looking at the Vegas's odds of who's going to win the Stanley Cup, and the two highest odds are the two teams facing off. Yes, in round one, with the Stars at plus 650 and Avalanche plus 800. The one and two odds for the Stanley Cup playoffs. And obviously, these are two teams that have been, incredibly dominant throughout the regular season. Winnipeg did win the President's Trophy. However, Dallas was in over 100-point team, as well as Colorado. And they approached the trade deadline like, yeah, we have this thing rolling, but we're just gonna add a V8 engine and we're just gonna keep riding, man. Like,
Yep.
they added a bunch of good pieces on both ends. Notably there was the trade for Rantanen initial mid-season that Colorado made, acquiring Martin Nikis, who's been fantastic for them. He's having a fantastic season. Added them to their artillery. And Mikko Rantanen, funny enough, ends up on Dallas and he's had 18 points in 20 games for them, added to a team with already a lot of juice. So, Luca, what are your thoughts on this matchup if we look at Dallas to start?
Well, first of all, let's just talk about, how big this matchup is, right? These are two teams that played each other last year. Dallas obviously beat them in 6 games. But these are arguably, in my opinion, probably the two best teams in the NHL. Like, if you have to talk about teams coming out of the West, right? Obviously, Winnipeg is there, right? But you're talking about Dallas and Colorado being arguably the two best teams in the league.
Teams are loaded.
Right. And, starting off with Dallas, let's just jump right into it. They've had a really good season this year, right? Lately, obviously, the last couple of games, their last, I would say, 10 games haven't been the best. They've lost, 7 straight. So they're not really going into the playoffs super hot. But they're still a very good team. Matt Duchene was a point-a-game player this year, 82 points in 82 games, scored 30 goals. Jason Robertson, who we're going to get into in a couple of minutes, right, 80 points in 82 games. Wyatt Johnston had a really good season. Roope Hintz had a decent season as well. Thomas Harley really came into the scene this year and bursted into a scene, 50 points in 78 games, replacing the injured Miro Heiskanen. And obviously, Jamie Benn had a really good season. And obviously, we talk about the big acquisition of Mikko Rantanen, 18 points in 20 games. And also, not really, let's say, a trade deadline acquisition, but an internal acquisition. Tyler Seguin will be back and will be ready to go for game 1 of the playoffs. He had 21 points in 20 games before his injury. So, and obviously in net, we talk about, Jake Ottinger being the guy that is obviously going to lead the line for Dallas in net. 909 save percentage, 2 shutouts. Not really his best season in terms of numbers, but we all know what Jake Ottinger is capable of doing. When he's at his best. So, just talking a little bit about Dallas, and obviously let's talk about the elephant in the room, Mikko Rantanen being able to return back to Colorado to play against his former team. I think he's going to be motivated. I think he's going to be pumped for this series. I think he's going to want a lot to prove as a player. Obviously it's been a weird season for Rantanen. Started the season obviously with the Colorado Avalanche, got traded near the trade deadline to the Carolina Hurricanes, played, I believe, like 13 games, and then got traded at the deadline to the Dallas Stars. So it's been a really interesting season for Mikko Rantanen, one that I think he probably doesn't want to relive again. But he seems to have found his footing in Dallas after not necessarily finding his footing in Carolina. 18 points in 20 games during his time in Dallas. Not the best numbers for a guy of Mikko Rantanen's caliber, but, like I said, with everything that's gone on, I think the numbers are still pretty decent. And look, he's won a cup with Colorado. He knows how good they are. He knows what they're going to bring to the table, having played with all those guys for so many years, right? So like I said before, he's going to be pumped. But what I'm interested in more for Dallas is their depth, right? Like I mentioned before, Matt Duchene, Wyatt Johnston, Roope Hintz, Jamie Benn, Mason Marchment, right? You talk about guys like Tyler Seguin, Mikael Granlund, who was a trade deadline acquisition as well, right? All these guys are going to be big roles for them. The thing for Dallas is their defense, right? Esa Lindell is still there. He's a shutdown guy. Obviously, Thomas Harley, like I mentioned before, really took a step this season. But the loss of Miro Heiskanen on the back end really is going to take effect for Dallas, and I think could be the big difference in this series, right? Heiskanen, really good defenseman, maybe not the season that he would have wanted this year. In the 50 games he did play, he had 25 points, so not his best offensive output, but still a really good defenseman on the back end for Dallas. Obviously one of the best defensemen in the league, but he obviously got hurt and injured his knee, and he probably won't play the start of the series, could be back for the
later part of the series.
Yeah. So that could be a difference maker if Dallas needs him, obviously, at the end. But as of right now, we're going into the playoffs without Miro Heiskanen, and I think that that's going to play a role. So Zach, I want to know, like, what do you think, just looking at Dallas and looking at their team, do you think this is a team that is going to be able to, beat Colorado again? And just what are your thoughts on their team? What do you think they're going to be able to bring to the playoffs?
Well, I think this is a team that, has probably the best collection of top 12 forwards in the league.
Yeah.
And that's the same conversation we were having last year with this group. And now they've got, they have a guy in Mikko Rantanen. They brought Matt Duchene back for a year, and, he's been a point per game. Wyatt Johnston has taken yet another step this year. That's what's scary about this team. If we're talking about from now to for the next couple of years, at least, you have, Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin are seasoned veterans, and, they're not the core nucleus of this forward group, but they're not expected to be anymore, because you have guys like Wyatt Johnston, who keeps getting better every year. Jason Robertson, who was seen wearing a cast, and, he's got an injury that he's really still a TBD. It's undisclosed what his timeline is, but it could be that he comes back sometime during the playoffs. Miro Heiskanen, I know I'm sidetracking a little, but Miro Heiskanen had to perform knee surgery 2 months ago. And even if he does come back, will we see him at 100%, and how long does it take him to get there? Wait and see. Or if they just don't want to risk it with him and are going to just shut him down until next season. That's a wait and see. But, back to their forward car, like I said, the young guys, Rupe Hintz has had a very good season this year as well. So you have your young core, right? And, they already have these guys signed. They signed Rupe Hintz long-term. They signed Robertson long-term. Wyatt Johnston, the same thing now. It's the other guys, they still have, great veterans on basically underprivileged money right now, like Matt Duchene, who's going to hit the market again for like the millionth time of his career. And you have Jamie Benn and, Tyler Seguin still on their deals, but those deals are coming to terms soon. And Mikko Rantanen, who somehow they found, their accountant was like going through the books and is like, somehow we're going to make this work long term and find money to dish out to Mikko Rantanen for a $12 million AAV deal. Right. And that's exactly what they did. And there's just stars galore inside this top 9, and really this top 12 is just extremely competent. And it's great going into a long format like the playoffs and where the schedule is so condensed, because you don't have to rely on one single guy. You can rely on everybody, and they could find a way to stay well rested for all 4 rounds of the playoffs if needed be. Yeah. And they'll be able to get it done. But I think for me, the problem with Dallas this right now is with the loss of Heiskanen. Okay, you're putting more on the wheels of a Cody Ceci, who I don't trust one bit. Matt Dumba, who's he's not the Matt Dumba we saw 4 or 5 years ago with Minnesota. He's just not that caliber player anymore. Right. Brendan Smith, whatever, and Eli Lyubushkin, who doesn't have necessarily the foot speed to be a consistent top 4 option as well. So it's the D-core that scares me for them. I don't have a problem with Jake Ottinger at all. I think he's a very above average netminder, but it's the D-core that really scares me for them. And I think that's something that Colorado could capitalize on. The Colorado, a team under Jared Bednar, if you watch them, they're always exciting. They always play with a ton of speed. They're able to to attack really well off the rush. Right. And they added a guy like Martin Nikis this year, who is not he's a very different player than Mikko Rantanen, but I think he works extremely well with Nathan MacKinnon. Like, I think they're just on the same wavelength. They're two speedy guys with high end skill, and they just read each other super well. Nichushkin is healthy for this playoffs, and they're a fully healthy team now. Jonathan Drouin came back and he's been playing great. Lekkonen's healthy. they added Brock Nelson, who is the top scorer on the Islanders before he got traded, and just a guy that is been a consistent scorer throughout his career. Their top six is looking very scary, and then in their bottom six which was maybe the knock on them last year when the two teams faced, but now they got a guy in Charlie Coyle, Ross Colton that they had added previously, Jack Drury, Logan O'Connor. Like this is a decent bottom six that they have here. And I think, against a team like Dallas, who could line up match galore and could really expose you because they have four really good lines, you could match up with these guys at least to an extent. And obviously, let me not forget Nathan MacKinnon, who scored over 100 points this year once again. And what I like better about Colorado is the decor. Devon Taves, Cale Makar is one of the best decors in the league, and two extremely great skaters. Sam Girard, Josh Manson, and Ryan Lindgren, who's had a resurgence after really falling out of favor and with the Rangers and getting traded earlier this year. There's not one thing I don't like about this team, and then Ned Mackenzie Blackwood is really coming into his own. Gabe Landeskog maybe he's going to join in at some point. He's got a stint already in the American League, and he scored in his first game over there. So this team is only going to get better with the addition of Gabe Landeskog, who is the heartbeat of this team and who is their captain. So, like I personally, and I've watched a lot of Colorado this year. I watched them. I had the opportunity to watch them at the Bell Center. Watching them in person, I didn't see any flaws in their game. I love their roster from top to bottom, and it's hard for me to bet against them. I think this is a series that ultimately will go down to 7 games.
Right.
But I think the team that'll go ahead in this one is the team that's been hotter down the stretch because Dallas has been dropping a lot of games, and for them maybe getting their momentum back, but definitely capable to do so. But I like the decor a lot better on Colorado, and being able to basically shut down an intense forecheck and to basically go up the ice with speed and contribute to the rush, which I don't think the guys in Dallas's decor could really do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for Colorado this year, I mean, obviously they've made a lot of changes to their roster, right? They really, really had a big roster turnover. Rantanen was a big part of their team for 49 games. He had 64 points during the time that he was there in Colorado. Obviously, he was moved, but they never really played with a full roster, right? They always had guys injured, and they still found ways to win games. Obviously, Nathan MacKinnon's had an exceptional year. Cale Makar has 30 goals as a defenseman, right? So obviously those two guys have been their top guys. And then it's kind of fallen off a little bit. But like I said before, they've dealt with a lot of injuries. So they've kind of had guys play in every position, and they've still found ways to win. Obviously, we talk about their decor as the big part of their team, right? Cale Makar, we know how great he is. Devon Taves is one of the most underrated defensemen in the league, right? Obviously, Team Canada representative. Has really shown, the capabilities of being a really good two-way defenseman who can be a good shutdown guy when needed to as well, right? You have Sam Girard, who's really underrated and really appreciative there. Sam Malinsky's a guy that really came into his own as well this year, playing 76 games. So they've done that, and they've kind of rotated their bottom pair. And like you mentioned, they traded for Ryan Lindgren, and he's been an asset for them as well. What I like about Colorado is obviously they've got a lot of pieces. I think they've got a lot of depth. I think obviously the acquisitions of Coyle and Nelson have really been big additions for them. And I think in the playoffs, you're going to need both those guys to be at their best. They traded Casey Middlestat. They brought in Marty Natchez this year, who I think has done really well. Kind of slowed off a little bit, 28 points in 30 games for Colorado. But, playing on that top line with MacKinnon and that power play, I think he's going to be a really good addition for them. But I think there's a lot to like for Colorado, right? And obviously, they still have Nichushkin, they still have Ross Colton, Jonathan Drouin has been good in the games that he's played. So I think there's a lot to like, and I think they've got a lot of experience being able to play with a lot of these guys that they have on their roster. Lehkonen is a guy who scores big goals in big games,
and especially.
Right. And he's a guy that in the playoffs always takes it up a gear, which I think is really important for them. But I think this series, in my opinion, is going to come down to who can stay healthy, but B, it's also going to be kind of a goaltending battle. I mean, you look at Ottinger, he wasn't at his best this season, just in terms of numbers. Mackenzie Blackwood's been pretty good. 9-13, 3 shutouts, 22-12, and 3, but he hasn't obviously played all that many games, right? Only 36. And Scott Wedgewood's looked good in the 18 games that he's played, but Colorado, like I said, have kind of had a different roster turnover this year, so they've had different players playing in different positions. I think it's going to be interesting to see how well Mackenzie Blackwood can do. What's kind of his expectation for the playoffs, and is he going to be able to steal some games against Dallas? Because Dallas is really good. They've got a lot of high octane players, like we mentioned before. They have 4 lines that they can roll that could really be difference makers to their team. Whereas with Colorado, it's a little bit different because their top 6 is really good, and their bottom 6, they have some good players, but they're not as deep offensively as they would be for Dallas. But what the difference does make is on the back end, right? You look at the top 6. I mean, Cale Makar, Devin Taves, Sam Girard, Josh Manson, Erik Johnson, and Ryan Lindgren might be the best decor in the league, right? So it's that I think is going to make the big difference is on the back end and in net, right? Is Mackenzie Blackwood going to be able to steal games for Colorado? Playing against a team that's really good and really good offensively, but at the same time, is Colorado's defense, who in my opinion have the best defense in the league, are they going to be able to shut down the Dallas offense? Because I think for offensively, I think Colorado can sort out Dallas's defense. I mean, like we mentioned before, if Miro Heiskanen's not back in the series, and even if he does come back, he probably won't be at 100%. And then you kind of look at their other players on the decor. I mean, after Esa Lindell and Thomas Harley, right, Lyubushkin doesn't really thread the needle. Cody Ceci doesn't really thread the needle. And then you got Brendan Smith, Matt Dumba, and you've got Nils Lundqvist. Like, it's not an elite decor on the back end for Dallas. So there's going to be a lot of, I think, shots that are going to come in from Colorado. I think Colorado's going to put a lot of pressure on Dallas's defense, and it's going to be about making sure that Dallas can kind of outscore their problems, I guess, is the word that I would use, that they're probably going to have to rely on because, like I said, you're coming up against Nathan MacKinnon and you're coming up against a really good Colorado offense that can score goals. Dallas is going to have to find a way to shut that down, and I'm just not sure they're going to be able to do that. So I think for that reason, I'm going to have to go Colorado. I'm going to say Colorado in 7 games. I wouldn't be surprised if they win in 6, though. But I like Dallas's team. I really do. I think they're you can look at the odds, right? They're clearly the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. I don't like their defense in this series against Colorado. And I think if Colorado can find ways to shut down their top guys for Dallas and to be able to limit them on how many goals they can score, then I think, you're going to win this series because Nathan MacKinnon is Nathan MacKinnon. Cale Makar is Cale Makar. We know what those guys are capable of doing. And when they're at their best and you add, Nichushkin and Drouin and Lehkonen and Natchez to that mix, it puts a big target on Dallas's back that I don't know if they're going to be able to handle. So we'll see. And it's also going to depend on Jake Ottinger. Is Jake Ottinger going to be able to have some playoff success? Because he hasn't always been at his best in the playoffs. And that, I think, has costed Dallas. The question is he going to be able to not only steal a game or two, but is he going to be able to steal the series, right? Is he going to be able to stand on his head and, make the saves that he needs to make to give Dallas an opportunity to win? Because when Jake Ottinger's on, like I said, he's a really good goaltender, but he's had times in the playoffs where he has looked really, really bad and has affected Dallas's playoff success. So it's going to be interesting to see what I think, but I think it's the hardest series to call, in my opinion. It's just there's too much, like, they're two teams that are so even, and it's like it's really going to come down to like who performs what, like who does well in certain situations, and who's going to steal a game or two, right? Like, is Blackwood going to stand on his head, or is Ottinger going to stand on his head, and is Dallas going to outscore their problems, right? That's the big question, I think.
Well, I think the biggest key to success for Dallas, especially, having the issues on their decor, is can Ottinger steal an extra game versus what Mackenzie Blackwood could do for you?
Right.
Because it's gonna be a competitive series from game one. And you're just gonna need that boost from your goaltender to really have a chance in this series. But for Colorado, they come in and they have something to prove as well. I was going through the Twitter boards, and Nathan MacKinnon is somebody I assume is extremely motivated because his line mate for the past, number of years now is on the other side and is his enemy against the team that, kicked their butt last year. So there's revenge definitely on his mind and on Colorado's mind as a team. And I compared the head coaches to Jared Benner, Pete DeBoer, two very very competent coaches, and obviously Pete DeBoer hasn't won. I believe he hasn't won the Stanley Cup yet as a coach, but he's been close numerous times.
Yeah.
So he's very competent as well. And I believe he made it 1 year with the Sharks,
and with Vegas.
With Vegas?
Did he do it with Vegas? Yeah, he
no,
did do it
not with Vegas. He did it with. Did he do it with Dallas a couple years ago?
He might have. I have to check.
Yeah, I think he was there, and then with the Devils back in the day, he made it, and they obviously lost to the Kings in that final.
Right.
But there's no shortstop for competence in this series. I think both teams
actually made it with New Jersey. It was New Jersey. He did make it with Vegas in 1920. That's when they lost to Washington. And then that's it.
Not with the Sharks.
He made it with the Sharks, the Devils, and Vegas. He made it 3 times to the Stanley Cup final, but he hasn't won.
So he's looking to win his first chip, and he's definitely has the team to do it in Dallas. Look, it's the playoffs, man. It's gonna be a game of inches between these two teams, and for us, for the fans, for Luca and I, it's so hard to predict a series like this when you have two teams that are like their differences are margins. They have. For every star player, the other one has one to match, and all of the components are there for both teams to have long playoff runs. But unfortunately, with this format, obviously the Central Division happens to have Winnipeg at 1, and then Dallas and Colorado are the de factos 2 and 3, and two teams that, like we showed before, have the highest odds to win the Stanley Cup. But one team has got to go in the first round. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. And I think that, like you said, right, it goes back to that. It's about both these teams are big offensive juggernauts. They've got superstar players on both ends of the ice. It's going to come down to a game of inches, like you said, right? It's about who's going to take their chances, who's going to be the difference maker in both seasons, in both series. And the other thing too is, we don't know that, like you mentioned before, right? We don't know the health status of Jason Robertson. If Jason Robertson misses time for Dallas, that could be a huge loss for them, right? Because they've already lost Heiskanen, and we don't know if what his status is for the series, absolutely, if he's gonna play. And then you lose Robertson. Yes, you've got Tyler Seguin, who's coming back, but Robertson was a big part of your team. He scored 30 goals for you this year, right? He was a huge part of your offense. Right. And he's been a big addition for you. So it's going to be interesting to see how Dallas is going to be able to manage their injuries that they're currently dealing with. Whereas with Colorado, right, they've kind of got a relatively healthy lineup. And obviously they've also got Gabe Landeskog back, who also has some uncertainty because he hasn't played all year, right? He hasn't actually played in 3 years. It's the first time he's really going to be playing meaningful hockey. He's been out for 3 seasons with an injury. Like you said, had a conditioning stint with the Colorado Eagles, ended up scoring a goal. Looked okay. I haven't really seen a whole lot of clips from Gabe Landeskog, so I don't know how much of a difference he's really going to make for Colorado. But having their captain back in this playoff series, I think is going to be huge for the team. It's going to be huge for the locker room because it's going to be able to have the support that they're going to be able to need, knowing that they're going on the ice with their captain, knowing that their captain is going to be present for this run. And even though he may not necessarily be a difference maker, because like I said before, he hasn't played in 3 years, so it's going to be hard to expect a lot out of Gabriel Landeskog, right? Just the fact that he's going to be there, I think, is going to be very motivating. And he's a player that, when he has been healthy and in the games that he has played for Colorado, right, before his injury, he was a big impact player. He was a difference maker for the Colorado Avalanche. So if he can, find a way to get up to speed as quickly as possible and still be effective for Colorado, that could be huge. So there's a lot of, I think, positives for Colorado. And I think for Dallas, it's a little bit more of concerns that we're just a lot of uncertainty that we don't know. But like I said, Dallas is still a really good team. I think they've got a lot of really good pieces, but it's going to come down to, is Dallas going to be able to outscore their problems? And also, how is Dallas's defense going to hold up against a really good, really fast, and really skilled Colorado team. That's where I think the difference is going to make. And obviously, the big question in that is going to be Jake Ottinger. Is Jake Ottinger going to be able to do it and shut down Colorado? Because in my opinion, I look at the West and I look at the East. And in my opinion, the team that comes out of the Colorado-Dallas series is going to the Cup final, in my personal opinion. That's just based on how the West is and how it's positioned. In my opinion, whoever comes out of this series between Dallas and Colorado is going to the Cup final, right? And Winnipeg fans might look at me and in disbelief, right? Vegas fans might look at me in disbelief and say, "Oh boy, what are you talking about? How could you doubt our team?" In my opinion, I look at these two teams and I go, whoever wins this series goes to the Cup final. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win it. I'm just saying I think they go to the Cup final. But my opinion could obviously change as the playoffs go. I haven't seen the other teams play. I haven't seen if there's teams that are going to be injuries. I haven't seen how well Colorado or Dallas is going to do. My opinion can change as the playoffs go on. But as of right now, if I'm looking at it as of today, whoever wins this series between Dallas and Colorado will head to the Cup final, in my personal opinion, as of right now. So I'm just trying to be careful and saying that my opinion can change because I don't want this to be held against me.
It will.
If I change my opinion,
it definitely will.
I'm aware, but I'm trying to save myself. But
when the team that wins the series gets bounced in round 2, they're the first person they're coming to is you.
The Winnipeg fans, if Winnipeg gets past round 1 and ends up beating Colorado or Dallas in round 2, is gonna be like, I told you so. I told you so. You doubted us, and I'll be like, no. I'm just saying that on paper and based on the series, that's my opinion. But like I said, it can change. If Colorado looks really bad against Dallas and somehow wins, and Winnipeg absolutely annihilates the Blues, then we'll have a different conversation when round 2 hits.
Definitely.
But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But in my opinion, Colorado in 7.
Yeah, and for me, the last thing I would say is that I think special teams can make a difference in this series.
Right.
Whatever team is on and has their special teams down packed, those small margins in close games could really make the difference. So it's the special teams for me. And obviously the goaltending is going to be a big factor, but nonetheless, we're going to have a very exciting series in the first round, and there's a lot more exciting series to cover. We have the Battle of Ontario coming up in one of our next videos. We also have the Battle of Florida coming up in another video. So we have still a lot to cover. Your beloved Montreal Canadiens as well. Those buggers found a way to sneak in at the end and finally win after 4 tries. They finally were able to clinch a playoff spot on the final game in dramatic fashion. But so there's definitely more to talk about, guys. Thank you so much for watching another episode of the Young Guns podcast. This has been Zach
and Luca.
And thanks so much for watching, guys. Peace.